maybe I should say a word because my social psychologist approach is a little bit different to yours, Bas, because it's a sociologic social approach and a psychoanalytical informed one. So it's a minority position in the social psychology. But maybe we could give, or I could give answers to questions you ask for the last 30 years. But let's see. Today I'd like to present you results of a longitudinal research project about right-wing extremism attitudes in Germany. The focus will lay on the relevance of economical wealth and its connection with right-wing extremist attitudes. The correlation between decreasing wealth and increasing right-wing extremism attitudes is well known, but there's a gap between the empirical findings and its theoretical explanation. Realizing that one of the most harmful causes for pollution is the order of capitalistic societies to grow makes the anti-democratic reaction to decreasing wealth a question of highest relevance. How could the resource-intensive production of goods could be changed if the society members behave like a junkie with cold turkey? I'm not only happy to be here, I'm also very nervous. And the reason for being nervous is quite simple, because I try to suggest an explanation that is quite difficult to explain in German, but nearly impossible in English for a non-native speaker. I present you an understanding of economical power as a narcissistic feeling. In Germany, a regulation of self-esteem for the members of German post-war society. But this function of wealth in Germany gives also a deeper insight in the function of wealth in market society. Germany is the ideal type, as Max Weber's concept, maybe you know it, this ideal typization, in his famous work, Protestantische Ethik, Protestantic Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. Germany is one of these ideal types to reconstruct the function of economical wealth, market society and the politics of unsustainability. My thesis implicates that the order to grow is a result of a failed enlightenment process. We are still living with a promise of salvation realized by the market society and its technology. I would say there is, maybe you know that at the end of the Middle Age, the medieval age, there was the Baroque time, who tries to intensivate the experience of the salvation good. And then things change, and I would say we are living now in a time where the modern promise of salvation is intensivated to the consumerism. And that's a problem we have to face. Also, big companies like Google work very hard on the utopia of technology to deal with the disaster of an insufficient body. And so commodities are surrogates, I would say, produced and used to compensate the insufficiency of the human body until the promise could be realized. There is no way to realize it. To realize the promise of salvation, we know it, unfortunately, but the promise is given, and so I would say, so we have to face the consequences. The schedule for today, for this in 30 minutes, to try to describe this argumentation in 30 minutes might be very difficult. We will begin with the results of the longitudinal study about right-wing extremism attitudes in Germany conducted since 2002. Right-wing extremism attitudes are the phenomenon which has to be understood. Since the early 19th in Germany and nowadays all over in Europe, we have to face the increase of strong right-wing, neo-Nazi or fascistic movements. But things are more different as we usually expect, using the phrase of right-wing extremism. One implication of the word, or the right-wing word, is that there is a political center of the society with democratic attitudes and a threat from the edge. Nothing could be as wrong as this idea of a center of society as a bastion of democracy. This thesis I would like to verify with results of our research projects, and that's the reason why we call it the Mitte studies, the Mitte-Studien. It's maybe possible to translate it as a center studies. I don't know it exactly. There are several explanations for right-wing extremist attitudes, and we'll see how much perceived threats influence the attitudes, but threats are not like threats, and so we have to discuss this too, and to understand the meaning, and that is maybe one difference between more social cognitive approach and the psychoanalytical one, because we are looking for meanings and reasons. They must not be conscious. Yeah? As a psychoanalyst, I would say they are usually they are unconscious, but they are not automatically. There are reasons to act, and there are meanings to act, and we have to understand the meanings and the reasons. Also, for not acting, for example. To understand the meaning of right-wing extremist attitudes, we conducted group discussions in Germany. Also, not only this quantitative approach, empirical approach, also we try to find a way with group discussions, and this is why in the second step results will be presented again from the group discussion study of 2007 and 2008. At the end I will give an outlook and will make suggestions for the discussions. So let's go further. The MIDI studies are a research project on political attitudes, I told you, on the distribution and influencing factors of right-wing extremist attitudes in Germany, and the following results are part of the survey on right-wing extremist attitudes. For the purpose of the study, biennial representative surveys have been carried out since 2002. Yes, it's a randomized sample. We sent interviewers to 400 sample points in Germany and conducted participants between 2,500 and 5,000. Yes, so the presented findings now are originated from the survey conducted in 2012. We construct a questionnaire with 6 dimensions of right-wing extremist attitudes and 18 statements which the participants could agree or disagree with. We are using a Likert scaling with 5 possible answers, fully disagree to fully agree, and presented 18 items, statements. Statements would be more precise, which we and these items or statements are summarized to 6 dimensions. And these are xenophobia, anti-immigrant position, nationalism, anti-Semitism, favorism of right-wing dictatorship, social Darwinism, and downplaying of National Socialism. So today I only present the anti-immigrant position, the anti-Semitism attitudes, and the favorism of a right-wing dictatorship. What we could see here are the summarized results, the value of agreement, and the detail, the possible answer of fully agree and mostly agree, that are percentages of agreement. So we could see that 7% of the German think that under certain circumstances in national interest, a dictatorship is a better form of state. I would say a top-down solution to deal with the disaster of environmental pollution would be a dictatorship. I could not agree with this. Maybe we could discuss about this, but that means that there is a group who know exactly what is to do, and that is a problem. We haven't it, because if you have this idea of light bulbs, yes, I think that's a very good example for sustained unsustainability, because this light bulbs we now have to use only sustainability of capitalism, because the market grow up. But the pulps we use now are something what have to be entsorgt werden, what have to be, this is Sondermüll. Yeah? They have to dispose of in a very, very difficult way. Yeah? And so we have a problem with this top-down solutions, but that's another, that's another point maybe for the discussion. In the interest of all, we should have a leader, with, in the original German questionnaire is the Führer, who rules German with a strong hand. 10% of the German agree with the statements, and 16 thinks that we need now one strong party which stands for the whole Volksgemeinschaft, what is also very difficult to translate, because it's something like not we the people, that maybe more a democratic idea. It's something like a racistic idea of a nation as an ethnic community. And here we have agreement of 16% of the society, of our participants. Anti-immigrant positions are very high in Eastern Germany. We could see it here. In the whole Germany, 36% agree with the statement that foreigners are coming to Germany exclusively to abuse our social system. And if the jobs are becoming rare, we should send the foreigners back into their countries. Is agreeable for nearly 32%, and for nearly 38%. Germany is dangerous, robbed of its identity, überfremdet. It's also again one of these ethnic ideas of nation. Through the many foreigners is agreeable by 38% of the participants. Anti-Semitic attitudes are not so far spread in Germany as the anti-immigrant positions, but we are talking about something like communication latence, that usually Germans don't show it directly that they have anti-Semitic attitudes. And so we could realize that through all 20%, we have to realize that through all 20% of the participants agree with the statement that Jews has too much influence. More than 50% see that Jews are doing nasty tricks more than others to get what they want, and nearly 15% agree with the statement that Jews are not fitting to us because they have something special and strong on themselves. So we could see that there is that the statements are agreeable for a lot of people, but to say that there are that people are, for example, have anti-Semitic attitudes or anti-immigrant positions, we use a cut-off value to fix the attitudes, and the average agreement in the dimension according to the attitudes you could see here. There's a cut-off point higher than 11. Maybe you can remember this Likert scale. You can fully disagree or fully agree. So you have 5 steps, and if you have 3 statements and sum them up, if you have more than 12 in the average, you agree with all statements. So we say who has a value of more than 11 in a dimension has a chauvinistic or anything else attitude. So these values are not so high as the statement values, but you can see that the anti-immigrant positions are high in 2012, and chauvinistic attitudes too. When we discuss this, reasons there are in the moment are very strong position to explain this attitudes in the social sciences, and this is the social identity theory, that there is a need for positive self-esteem, and under conditions of perceived threat, group membership has been shown to become increasingly important for people. And climate change can increase society's propensity to conflict by changes in social structural conditions. So we could discuss also that there is an influence of perceived threat by climate change or pollution, which influences the democratic or anti-democratic attitude. The impact of social threat is well known, and there's this terror management theory to explain it also, that under mortality salience, what means that the people are confronted with their own possibility to die, and that then their people under mortality salience then have a tendency to outgroup discrimination, what is also well known. But what is also now shown is that currency is a strong object of identification, a cultural symbol which help to deal with mortality salience also. So there is a connection of wealth or economy to this influence of perceived threats. And there is a subtle impact, we know it also, of climate change on authoritarian tendencies. If we look at this Gallup poll from the 2007 to 2008, conducted in 127 countries, we can see that not all participants confess that they have the feeling of threat by rising temperature, or that they think that the rising temperature is a result of human activities. You could see here Great Britain with less than 50% think that of the Britons think that climate change is a result of human activities. In the USA, the same, and you can see that in a lot of industrial areas, the people don't think that climate change is a result of human activities. If we follow Jürgen Habermas in his very old book from the 70s, Legitimation Crisis, there is only then a crisis if the society members experience it as a crisis. If no subject has an idea of crisis, there is none, he would say. As a social psychologist, I could not completely agree with this social philosophical argument, but because usually crisis coming to consciousness when output legitimation increase, that's well known. That's what I started to argument with, is that democracy has no possibility to give wealth for a lot of people. Usually the anti-democratic attitude rise. But if no one say that there is a crisis, means not that there are no effects of crisis in an unconscious way. And that's what we have to face, I would think. And so we have to leave Habermas again, because the crisis could have effects at other places than the consciousness perceived. We used a questionnaire also in 2012 to measure the perceived threats in different areas. And here we could see that ecological threats, that there are nearly 50% of the Germans who perceived ecological threats, but the most of the Germans perceived national threats. What means that there are some people who perceive that there are who are worried about climate change, but there are also a lot of people who are worried about nations' wealth, that are statements in this dimension of perceived threats. And there is a correlation between this dimension, but between perceived ecological threats and nation threats, there is a low of 50%, 0.5 correlation. If you take a look at, if you're trying to fix the influence of the threats, you can see in a regression analysis that there is a higher influence of national threats to right-wing extremist attitudes and a negative one for those who perceive environmental threats. So we can see that that's a good message for today, that those who perceived an ecological threat usually are less anti-democratic than those who perceive a national threat. This is adjusted R square of 2.2. That's not so much, but we will see later on that it's very difficult to find a higher influence or higher square than this. Okay, let me go further to the group discussions. We conducted in 2007 and 2008. After the survey of 2006, we won 60 participants for this group discussions, and it was these participants of the group discussions were those of the survey. We documented the addresses and asked them afterwards to participate at the group discussion. So we could sample group discussions with high scorer, low scorer, and neutral one. And we have 12. We had 12 group discussions in East, West Germany, North and the South, in cities and small towns, and we conducted it to learn more about the group attitude development and how it does functions and which psychosocial needs does it serve. We interpretate the data following a qualitative approach with a psychoanalytical orientated in order to analyze more closely how right-wing extremist attitudes function, what they mean, and how and why they are produced. We started with a neutral question. We don't want to learn more about their attitudes to the chancellor or so on. We want to know how they see the world and how they experience their experience of the world is, and then in the next step how the political attitudes are manifested by this worldview. So we ask them, what is it like to live in this city region, and give them and told them that we don't say anything anymore, and we want them to discuss with them in the group. And we record the group discussion and then make a transcription afterwards, and the interpretation was on the base of the transcription afterwards. You can see here examples. All names are anonymized, and if you see this sign, means that the speaking is simultaneously. So here we can see that for Wagner, participants in Neuss in Western Germany said, no, that's an issue amongst kids of poor people and of rich people, right? Sorry, I have to say. In response to the question regarding what is life like in Neuss, the participants begin discussing shopping opportunities first at all in the Rhine-Ruhr region. That I have to say first. Their discussion about participating in material consumption and access to material commodities refers indirectly to the shared experience of prosperity, we would say. Subsequently, they touch on intergenerational aspects by speaking about their children's generation and by discussing symbols of status. So here for Wagner say, no, that's an issue among kids of poor people and of rich people, right? Those of the rich people suppress the poor kids. Oh, look at your clothes or those. Yeah, Wernicke agree. Those who don't have anything, they try to, if for example there's a weak guy, they will try to steal his clothes. Because they themselves don't have anything, that's one of those things. That's not the child's issue, so that's an issue of self-confidence. And that's an issue of the parents, sure. For Wagner notes that the pressure of stigmatization on children whose parents cannot afford buy them brand clothing. Further on, for Wagner speaking as a about the economical miracle in the West Germany of the 1950s. And that's another issue of my parents' generation who defines themselves by it, of consumption. My parents as well. My mother would like to, would be like, look, Eigner, Job. You know, maybe this brands, yeah, a little bit more expensive than other. She wanted other people to see, hey, we succeeded in life, right? I'm just saying, if I had the Prada label on the back or whatever, that would be my business. I know I have cashmere sweater, but that would be enough. Whereas for my mother, being a member of the other generation, it's important for her that other people also see how she succeeded. For Wagner, speaking about economical miracle in the West Germany of the 50s, and she also contrasted her experience with the problems of kids nowadays. This background frames the issue of prosperity, we would interpret, as well as the significance of its documentation. Current experience of deprivation are indexed historically, with prosperity being contrasted with the immediate post-war period. At the same time, for Wagner alludes to the necessity to reassure oneself and others of participating in prosperity. She locates the wish to document prosperity in her parents as well as in her children. Although she claims not to need the miracle of others, she does articulate her enjoyment of the goods and symbols of prosperity. And other participants of this group discussion, Herr Wörnicke, 5 minutes, okay, joins the discussion of a historical references initiated by Frau Wagner. That's correct. On the other hand, when I went to school at the end of the 40s or the early 50s, the social divide was immense. There was a high unemployment rate. There were the so-called newly rich, who by 1948 became rich very quickly, and who are supposed to be the norm for the normal public. Prosperity or well-being was not the standard before the second half of the 50s. Then in the 60s, okay, I must say, the economic miracle had an impact. Only then, after the 50s and 60s, would many Germans in former Western Germany be able to participate in social prosperity, as expressed in the slogan, prosperity for all, from the former Minister for Economy, Ludwig Erhard. That's a book published in the 50s by this minister called Wohlstand für alle, Prosperity for All. That was his political program. And it marks the political promise of economical participation that Herr Wörnicke, together with other participants, considers fulfilled in the time period of the economical miracle. Once more, the World War II as an historic event frames the topic of economic prosperity. And now the last quote from the other group discussion. Verröbel said, and from this moment things got better. And we all come into a wheel into the economical miracle. We stop to give thoughts to anything else. And we think that this illustrates a lot of discussions we could conducted and about all ages or generations in Germany. So there's refer to this economical miracle in Germany, and it gives a meaning to the sense of prosperity today, we would say. This historical dimension, the economical wealth as a historical index in Germany, means that economic boom following the war. There was one historical event before this economical miracle, and when they said we have born, when boom had arrived, we stopped thinking about anything else. It gave an idea what we took seriously, because we know it from other research projects of the 60s, Alexander Mitscherlich and Margarete Mitscherlich, that there was a defense of shame and an inability to mourn in Germany after the war. After the war, after the World War II, there had been, should have been, a realization what Germans had done, and the idealized object of the Führer and the Übermenschentum, the idea of a race of higher quality, has to be given up. Nothing like this happened in the 50s, and so there was no idealized object for the regulation of self-esteem in the first step, and there was no potential to accept the violence of Germans in whole Europe. And we would say that in this gap there was a filling. The wealth, the economical wealth, the prosperity for all was a compensation for the lost feeling of greatness after losing the war. The inability to mourn and to it allows to deny the lost, and in the inability to mourn and to admit guilt. Okay, I become under pressure, and my English don't become better, but it doesn't become better. But let's see what I can. Maybe I made the point of this narcissistic feeling. We can't, in one of the following surveys, we try to evaluate this results in Western Germany. In Germany, we could see that there's a higher influence of collective economic deprivation. We asked them, so the participants in 2010, how they what they expect from the collective economical development in Germany, and if they expect decreasing wealth. That was the highest influence to right-wing extremist attitudes, higher than any individual experience of that. So I would say, as I told you at the beginning, that Germany is not an island. That economical wealth could become, in the state of a narcissistic feeling, has an historical background. It is closely connected to the meaning of capitalistic and market society. And we could see here the International Social Survey Program conducted in the 19th in a lot of countries worldwide, how much national pride is in the countries and what are the reasons for the national pride. And we could see that in Germany it's the pride on economy and nothing else. Yes, but it's not the only country. We could see that in Germany, Eastern and Western Germany, it was the highest value, but also in other countries, especially in the industrial ones, there is also highest influence of economy, of the proud to be proud with the nation. I would say, and that's the conclusion and outlook, in Germany is the idealized type where the function of capitalistic society could be understood. It was imposed by Germany, West Germany. The feeling replaced the collective identification with grandiosity as embodied in the image of the Führer, and the collective meaning of the object of a strong economy has been transmitted intergenerationally. Sorry. Max Weber, psychosocial function of wealth, regulation function of individual and collective self-esteem through religion decreased, the significance of economy took over. Capitalistic as a scientific buffer is an heritage of religion, and if we are right, we have to face that the society has the face to grow, and maybe we got a deeper insight in the unsustainability development in market societies. Their order to grow is strongly connected to the promise of salvation. No one thinks of a commodity as a sacred good, but they are surrogates until to live with insufficient human body until the capitalistic society is able to fulfill the promise of the completely prosthesization of the human body. And I would say there is no rationality. In fact, neoliberals are believers or prayers, and they are very powerful because the wealth is something like a surrogate for missed salvation of the human body.